Good afternoon. Would you please rise? I say welcome. It is great to see so many of you here today. Excited for, we're getting a little bit of feedback here. Excited for the conversation that we're going to have today with Hunter Roberts. Before that, we're going to go ahead and get started with our Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I'd ask that you remain standing, and I'll have Ryan Budmeyer come forward to share the invocation.
Please join me. Dear Lord, we ask that you guide and direct our club, its leaders, and our actions. Grant that each of us may feel our responsibility to Rotary, to our community, to our country, and indeed to all countries and peoples. Bless our fellowship today, and bless this food to the nourishment of our bodies in your service. Amen.
All right, you can be seated, and welcome on another brisk spring day in South Dakota. Grateful to have you here and have guests here as well. We do have junior Rotarians with us today from Roosevelt, Alex Folger and Mandy Dirks. And don't believe Jack Linga is able to join us from Roosevelt, but please join me in giving them a warm Rotary welcome. All right, thank you. Welcome again, Alex and Mandy. We'll be hearing from you shortly. Next, we have guests. A number of you invited guests. We're going to have Ryan Martin with the mic, so those that are listening online are able to hear. Eric Erickson, you have a guest.
Thanks, President Tony. Fellow Rotarians, two guests with me today that are heavily involved in the ag market from Paulson is Sarah Stever, CTO, and Marcus Squire, CEO of Paulson. Please welcome them.
Thanks, Eric. Welcome, Sarah and Marcus. Lauren, you have a couple guests.
Thank you, President Tony and fellow Rotarians. First of all, I'd like to introduce Joe Beal and Scott Weck. Joe, I have the pleasure of serving with Joe as a commissioner for the South Dakota State Fair, where we serve under the capacity as advisory and under the umbrella of the Department of Agriculture and Natural Resources. And Scott, her husband Scott, is the president, CEO of the W.H. Lyons Fairgrounds and Sioux Empire Fair.
Thank you, Lauren. Welcome, Joe and Scott. Great to have you here today. Dwayne Wack, roaming Rotarian from Rotary West, welcome. Joe Kipley, you have a guest.
Thanks, President Tony. I've got Brad Dale with me here. He's visiting from the Twin Cities with Cherry Creek Mortgage, but like many stories you've been hearing lately, he's seen the light and all roads lead to Sioux Falls, so he has some family here and hoping to relocate his business and family here to Sioux Falls. So let's welcome Brad.
Thank you, Joe. Brad, welcome to Downtown Rotary and welcome to Sioux Falls. Great to have you. Shelley Johnson.
President Tony and fellow Rotarians, my guest today is Brandon Vitos. He is with Amy Stockberger. He's Director of Sales for their home support team, Advantage, and Brandon recently relocated back to Sioux Falls from North Dakota. So, welcome.
All right. Great to have you, Brandon. Thanks for being here. Next, want to remind you, you would have received it in your morning email this morning. We have over 20 spots still available to give back, to give blood next Monday. We're going to have the Bloodmobile here at the Holiday Inn and encourage you to step up and sign up to give back to our community that is in need of blood right now. So You can get that information. There's a link in the email that I sent. Pretty easy to register, and look forward to making the most of having that bloodmobile here for the day next Monday, May 2nd. Next, I am going to ask Kayla Etram to come forward to introduce our junior Rotarian today.
Good afternoon, everyone. This is our final junior Rotarian speaker for the school year. What an awesome year it has been, and we have an awesome last speaker to share with you today. So we're excited to welcome Mandy Dirks from Roosevelt High School. She is involved in choir, theater, Link Crew, Cancer Awareness Club. She's a junior zookeeper, which I need to learn more about because that sounds awesome. Is a sales associate at Journeys, and she is also involved in volleyball, reading, and outdoor adventuring. She plans to attend Hamline University in St. Paul next year with majors in biology and forensics. She wants to be a forensic scientist or a crime lab analyst. So please help me welcome Mandy.
Hi guys, thank you for having me. So as Kayla said, I am part of theater, and it's been basically like my entire life. So when I was a kid, I started doing like elementary plays at my church, all that type of stuff. And then moving on to middle school, I did the two musicals that we had there, which was Shrek Jr., and I played one of the three pigs. And then Lion King Jr., where I actually got to play Shanzi, one of the main hyenas. So that was pretty fun. Throughout those middle school years, I also went to a couple church camps farther up in South Dakota where I had like more musical experience, a bunch of different things like that. Even in 8th grade, there was a class called Speech and Drama, and I really wanted to be in that because it's basically like the middle school version of theater class. But my overachieving self decided that we were going to go to Spanish instead and go into that, and because it's basically a class that transfers onto high school, which is why I went into it, but I was a little disappointed that I couldn't be in the speech and drama class. After middle school, that was my last performance until my junior year. So moving on to high school, the volleyball season kicks up, show choir gets really busy, and there's barely any free weekends that I can be in a show. So all throughout freshman year and until the very end of my sophomore year, I couldn't be in any theater shows at all. Until the winter one, which I didn't have the chance to audition for, but I could go in and I could help tech for the show, be backstage, all that sort of stuff. So I did that, but my club volleyball decided to change one of their tournament dates to the weekend of the show. So I had to walk up to my director and say that I couldn't do it anymore. And when I tell you I bawled, I definitely bawled my eyes out. It was not a fun time. But then junior year, the same thing kind of happened, volleyball. But then I did finally get to tech for a show. It was called Leaving Iowa. I did costumes, and that was one of my favorite things ever because there were just so many characters that I had to like get into costume, and we changed costumes a lot, so that was fun. And then at the very end of my junior year, I finally got to audition for a show. It was called The Chalk Garden, and it was a show that my director made a lot of female roles in because the senior graduating class had a lot of females that were in theater. So he made it a female-heavy show. And it was The Chalk Garden, like I said. And then, so I auditioned, and I actually got the lead role, and her name was Laurel. So that was super fun because it was my first high school acting experience ever. After that, the summer actually freed up, and I got to play Gopher in Winnie the Pooh. So those are some fun roles. And Theater 2, I finally got to be in Theater 2. So like there's the Theater 1 and Theater 2 classes in high school, and even my school schedule didn't really like those. So I could only be in theater my junior year, and then Theater 2 my senior year. And then, so my senior year, I was in Theater 2, and Theater 2 puts on a show. So that was called Dearly Departed, and I also got another lead in that one. And then finally, we're on to our last show of my senior year, which is Something Rotten. It's the musical. It's a lot of fun. We actually open next week, so that's going to be interesting. So overall, it's been a journey with theater, that's for sure, but I plan on continuing that in college too. So it's going to be a super fun time for me. So thank you.
All right, Mandy, with that energy, you'll no doubt go far. So appreciate you being here with us the month of April, and wish you the best with graduation heading into next year. Next, we have an opportunity to hear from someone local as well as someone from across the globe at the same time. And excited to have Per Thrain Nielsen, a Rotarian from Oslo, Norway, and Ben Iverson, all the way from 33rd and Grange here in Sioux Falls. He's the Director of International Programs, and they're going to be here to share the work that is happening. I should mention Per is a graduate of Augie, spent 7 years in South Dakota or in Sioux Falls. We're excited to have him back. And for your time here with our club, Per, we do have a Rotary flag that we'll send you home with. But we appreciate you being here, and I'll invite you and Ben to the stage now to share more.
It's always nice to be back in Sioux Falls. I had some good years here, got to have a lot of friendships through that. Greetings from Oslo Rotary. This year we are 100 years old, and as everything is going virtual, we sadly no longer have these banners to give. So sorry about that, but warmest greetings from my club. And it's always fun to also be back at Augustana, because it's amazing to see what the international programs did while I was in town, how they're reaching out to the community, but how that is growing and expanding even more now through Ben. And I also then have the pleasure of serving on an advisory board for international programs for him. So over to Ben.
Thanks very much, Per, and thanks to all the Rotarians for having us. I thought I'd just give a quick overview of Augustana. Probably a lot in the room, if you're local, know a bit about us, but we're the oldest institution, I think, in the state. And about 2,100 students. Of those, roughly 150 international students from 50 different countries. And that's really grown even over the last couple of years and during the pandemic. And we're particularly proud that also on the outbound side, at least pre-pandemic, more than 53% of our graduating students had studied abroad someplace by the time they graduated. And so just to give you some context, the national average for that is maybe 10 or 11%. So Augie graduates come with a lot of international and intercultural experience for sure. So within my office, that's kind of the scope of responsibilities, both inbound and outbound student mobility. So we recruit overseas. That's partly how Per ended up at Augustana so many years ago. We help international students with their compliance and cultural adjustment issues when they're here. We're designing customized programs for our foreign partners. So if they want to send students, high school students maybe, for a short-term program in the summer, we'll design something especially for them. Of course, we're doing lots of programming and those kinds of things. And big for us these days is the concept of comprehensive internationalization. So we want to continue to send students out and to receive students from abroad, but we also want to continue to do a better job of reaching out to local community partners and making sure that international examples are brought to campus and the students have a chance to interface with you all as well. I'm actually going to turn it over to Per for this one. He'll explain why he wants to talk about Study Away.
Kind of ironic, isn't it, that the international student burns most about the study away side? But that is also because Sioux Falls, South Dakota is in the middle of the states. It's fairly remote from any other country, any other culture. So in having such a strong program at Augustana to actually give that international perspective, you're getting graduates from Augie that can really contribute to the local community by having that broader perspective. And that also is something that I'm going to tie into later when we're talking about how to interact further with the local community, because it's giving so much opportunity to have people come together in the same room with multiple perspectives and a global perspective. So you're seeing from the facts there on the board, just 53%, as Ben mentioned, that have that international experience by the time they graduate, and seeing the numbers of the courses, and seeing also that they have expanded to have a program in Costa Rica for the semester. It just really shows how Augustana is really emphasizing that importance.
On the international side, we covered some of this already, but we're advising nearly 200 students when you include the fact that on a student visa, lots of the business folks in the room probably know this, but international students are allowed to work on their student visa for 1 year for sure, and up to 3 years total if they happen to be in a STEM field. So thanks for those of you that consider employing international students when they graduate. They're still sort of on our advising roles, but again, a nice diversity of students. And there's sort of the breakdown. Not necessarily the list that you would expect, probably. A lot of institutions in the United States are heavily dominated by China and India, and we certainly have some representation there. Augie doesn't currently have an engineering program. That's where a lot of the interest from China and India comes, but lots of diversity among our international student population. And so PAIR is here in part because we just had my IPO advisory board meeting, and so would invite any in this room that might like to get involved in international exchange and higher education to consider that opportunity. We recently just hired somebody in South Asia to recruit full-time. We feel like that's going to be a huge growth opportunity for us. Working on those inbound customized programs and increasingly, as I mentioned earlier, thinking just more about how we can engage with the local community and really becoming a center both on campus for internationalization as well as a center of knowledge and resources for the local community. So as we're just starting phase 2 of Augustana's strategic plan to 2030, and that's something we definitely really want to focus on over the next couple of years in phase 2 of our strategic plan. This is one example of that, and I'm going to invite Per to talk a bit about this as well.
So then it comes to what if, how can we? And if you're looking at how we can interact with the community and also coming out of COVID, seeing what we achieved through virtual meetings, then what we've been drawing about is to find areas that are of interest to Sioux Falls business community when it comes to technology development, matching that with the academic programs at Augustana, and then seeing through international links such as Oslo Rotary, which has already heard about this, about how we can get speakers into a virtual forum to actually speak on some great initiatives, something that can create money in your pocket. And then if we can do that, then after we have that virtual forum, is there potential that we can talk together about how we achieve creating that value from Augustana's perspective, research programs, internships, stuff that we can get out of it. But mostly, I mean, this is something that can create so much perspective, so much opportunity, so much dialogue, and in the way that when you're studying, you're getting a foundation. Then it helped me so much my time at Gateway to know what I want to proceed with. And so that interaction with business is so vitally important. And when you have an organization that is that linked into the international, to build onto that relationship. So right now, we are in very initial stages on talking with the administration at Augustana. We are talking to Oslo Rotary, and they're definitely on board with creating some of those connections for potential speakers. And then we definitely want to use the connection to Sioux Falls Rotary. And I told Ben he has only one choice to make, and that is which Rotary Club that he needs to join.
Very good. So this is our last slide. Certainly we would be interested in more discussions about what Per was talking about. And I think that someone from your club, in fact, is speaking with our university leadership about Rotaract in another month or so. And so that's a good way potentially for us to get started. But beyond that, there are a number of ways if you'd just like to engage with us generally. We have a huge need for friendship families. This is not a live-in host family situation, but just a chance to connect kind of informally and socially with an international student. So sometimes I use the example if your family goes to the Spanish immersion program and you'd love to kind of get to know a native Spanish speaker, for instance. We would love to make those kinds of matches if you have those kinds of specific interests. Every Friday at 4 p.m., almost every Friday, not before breaks, but almost every Friday at 4 p.m., we do a cultural presentation. So a student from one of those 50 countries that I listed there gets up and talks a little bit about home. So it's a nice way for free. It's open to the community. Welcome to join us if you want to duck out early on a Friday afternoon sometime. Or join the advisory board and be like Per and give all of us on my team a little bit of advice. But invite you to engage with us. Thanks so much for the opportunity to chat with you all today, and hope to talk with you afterwards. Thanks so much.
As Hunter and Cindy come forward here, I want to say thank you to Ben and Per for the work that you're doing to build relationships across the globe. And Per, we're looking for members of our membership committee. I believe you might have what it takes to go out there and recruit for us. So thank you for your work there and for the plug. But really appreciate that. And as you know, Rotary International has 1.2 million members across the globe, and it's just a treat to have a fellow Rotarian from across the seas be with us here today. All right, turning our attention to today's program, we have Hunter Roberts. He currently serves South Dakota as Cabinet Secretary of the Department of Agriculture and Natural Resources. In August 2019, he began leading the Department of Environment and Natural Resources in its mission to protect public health and the environment. 1 year later, Governor Noem announced her plans to merge the departments of Agriculture and Environment and Natural Resources into the Department of Agriculture and Natural Resources, DANR, and tapped Hunter to lead the merger of the new department. Now operating as a single agency, the Department of Agriculture and Natural Resources' mission is to protect and preserve agriculture, the environment, and natural resources through effective regulatory services, natural resource conservation, and financial and technical assistance. Hunter began his career in public service with the Governor's Office of Economic Development in 2007 as Assistant State Energy Director. Soon after, he transitioned to the Energy Policy Director, where he led the state's efforts to promote business development in power generation, energy production, and clean energy manufacturing until the end of 2014. Hunter then went on to serve as policy advisor to Governor Dennis Dugard, where he worked on issues related to transportation, agriculture, energy, environment, land management, and outdoor resources. Most recently, Hunter served as Deputy Secretary and Director of Labor and Management at the Department of Labor and Regulation. Hunter holds degrees, master's degree and his Juris Doctorate from the University of South Dakota. He's a South Dakota native. He resides in Pierre with his wife and 2 children. Hunter is a 5th-generation South Dakota farmer and rancher who owns and operates a diversified grain and cow-calf farm and ranch southeast of Fort Pierre with his family. I would ask you to join me in welcoming Hunter to Downtown Rotary. I'll say thank you, and we'll turn it over to Cindy to moderate the conversation.
I too welcome you to Downtown Rotary. Secretary Roberts, thank you for being here. We're going to have about a half hour to visit about all the things in your world. And I think we should maybe start with an understanding of the Department of Agriculture and Natural Resources. As the Secretary, tell us what the department is, describe what falls under its scope.
Well, thanks, Cindy. I certainly appreciate the invitation. Nice to be here in Sioux Falls. Lived here a short time in Sioux Falls when I was getting my JD down at USD back in the 04, 05, and 06 timeline, so it's been a while. But certainly love to get back to Sioux Falls and see all the exciting things that are happening. Certainly a lot of construction again happening down here, so that's exciting to be part of. So the Department of Agriculture and Natural Resources is broadly a lot of what we do, a lot of the mission of what we do is regulatory in nature. Certainly we have our Division of Ag and Environmental Services. They're doing everything from air quality permits to pesticide inspections, surface water permits, some things like that. A lot of permits, many of which, minerals and mining, many of which come from federal regulations that are pushed down that the state has been delegated to implement for the EPA. So that's a large part of what the department does. Certainly not all of what we do. We have a resource conservation and forestry division that does a lot of more of on the ground, boots on the ground, looking at different ways to implement best management practices for agriculture producers, look at forest management practices across the state, and look at ways to improve our conservation side of things. The Conservation Commission is under that division, so they provide grants and resources to our conservation districts that do a lot on the ground stuff like buffer strips and tree belts and conservation activities like that that certainly are important to keeping our state green. Beyond that, we also have a water division of water that provides water rights or allocates water rights. In South Dakota, we're right on the cusp of western states versus eastern states. If you go to Minnesota, they don't allocate groundwater rights. In South Dakota, we do. You go further west, they do a lot of the states. In South Dakota, we don't mine our water, we allocate it. So 30 years down the road, 100 years down the road, if you have a water right, we do not take our groundwater, we don't mine it, we don't take it out. We base rates that we allocate on surface water replacement. So as our aquifers are replenished, that's what we allocate. We don't allocate beyond that. Certainly there's seniority rights to that to make sure if an aquifer is seeing depletion and what we had allocated before isn't working, then we would scale back based on seniority who doesn't have those rights. Certainly surface water discharge is looking at kind of, an example would be the city of Sioux Falls and their wastewater treatment plant, what they're allowed to put in the waters of our state into our drainages would be part of what that program does. And then there's the state fair. Doesn't fit really exactly into kind of the regulatory on the ground side of things, but certainly works. Lauren already called out Joe and Lauren who are here and on our State Fair Commission. They do a great job helping our state, helping me and the State Fair staff really push forward in ways to improve improve the state and the State Fair. The unique thing about our fair, I think, compared to others, is that it's very agriculture based. A lot of ag exhibits, 4-H, competitive type ag exhibits, certainly a lot of education opportunities on the ag side, and it's a small world. Certainly South Dakotans are friendly. You come to the state fair, it gives everyone a great opportunity to see all parts of agriculture in South Dakota beyond the big equipment and the seed dealers and all the vendors. There's a great opportunity to sit down with a 4-H kid and he'll tell you all about his calf or his sheep or his lamb and his goat or her goat and give you the whole story and all the work that they put into that year to be at the fair showing. So pretty broad group, but certainly a lot of it's tied in agriculture, land use, and the way we keep our state clean and moving forward.
So as secretary, what are your responsibilities?
So as secretary, certainly, doing things like this, which probably aren't my favorite things to do, being a...
What's the easy crowd? Come on.
This downtown Rotary is a little more robust than the Pier Rotary, I'll tell you that much. But being a face for agriculture and environment in the state is certainly what part of the job. Certainly advocating politically and through the legislative process, working with our many ag groups and our environmental groups to implement good policy, things that help our state, improve our state, make our state stronger are certainly a part of the job. Mm-hmm. Also, it's managing, an office of 250 to 350 people, making sure that people have the resources they need to do their job well and make sure that we're following the laws. A lot of what I do on the regulatory side is what the legislature or the federal government has passed in law for us to do. So that's a lot of what we do is make sure we're enforcing the laws. What I think is unique about our team at DANR, and certainly which I emphasize, is working with our permittees, working with the citizens of our state to do it right. You look at a lot of the permitting side of things, these are very long-term permits. So a focus we have at the department is mistakes happen. We have floods, we have environmental mistakes that happen. Work together to get companies, get businesses, get communities back in compliance. Yelling at them, putting out press releases, finding a bunch is all tools we have in the toolbox, but they're not very effective long-term you destroy that relationship. We always look at ways to work with them, help them work through the permitting process. When they have issues, work with them, help find solutions, instead of just saying, you did it, fix it, and we're going to fine you, and put it in the news. So I think that's one thing I really like about the team we have at the department, and certainly something that I always push is let's work with our permittees, let's work with the citizens, work with our different groups to move the state forward instead of being an adversarial relationship, which I don't think is as impactful.
Well, and this is a fairly new department. It was a merging of the Department of Ag and the Department of Natural Resources under Governor Noem's leadership. So for those who might not be very familiar with the transition or heard about it in a little bit here and a little bit there, walk this room through the rationale for that decision, the timeline. Kind of tell us that story.
Well, timeline-wise, I think it's pretty easy to start with. In the pandemic started 2020. Early summer, maybe even late spring, the Department of Ag Secretary Kim Vanneman resigned. So there was an open position. Lieutenant Governor Larry Roden took over as an interim. And then kind of through that whole timeline, I would say it was kind of awkward for the staff and certainly the governor's office to try to hire someone when you're in the middle of a pandemic. Definitely not ideal. I guess about mid-July, I got hit with, hey, we think that maybe we should merge the Department of Agriculture and the Department of Environment and Natural Resources together. We had some good discussions with the governor's office. Certainly I tried to talk her out of it, but no, I think through those discussions we came about how can we make this better? What's the value proposition for the citizens of the state? Because that's really what matters. How can we streamline things, save taxpayer, fee payer dollars, and roll out a better customer service agency for the department? Through that, definitely a lot of movement, but I think thus far we're very successful in doing that. In a state like South Dakota that's very ag-driven, I mean, vast majority of our state is production agriculture. How do you implement environmental practices, the best environmental policy, without having agriculture at the table? The thought is if you have one agency, you're not working against each other, you're having those discussions behind closed doors and out in the public, so it's a more robust discussion instead of siloing between different agencies where you can get kind of this not robust discussion. So through that process, I think it was announced, or I know it was announced end of August, the merger, and then I guess my team and the Department of Agriculture, Natural Agriculture's team all started meeting regularly, putting together a plan of how this would all work. By budget season, we needed to have two departments merged. Through that process, we were able to come up with a plan. One example I think that's worked very well is the Resource Conservation and Forestry was actually a division in the Department of Agriculture. In the Department of Environment and Natural Resources, we had a watershed protection program that implements watershed protection activities, provides grants to water development districts and folks like that to implement best management, help producers implement best management practices and provide on-the-ground resources to improve our surface water quality. So it was kind of we rolled that into the Resource Conservation and Forestry. I think it's been a very good fit. I think you talk to the conservation side of things, the environmental side of things, they've really appreciated that effort. So instead of kind of working against each other, I think it's worked well. Another benefit that I think has been nice is when we respond to emergencies. In statute and law, there was a couple different regulatory avenues. If, let's say I have a fertilizer truck that spilled or a diesel fuel spill in an ag field, you might need to have before you had to have the Department of Agriculture and the Department of Environment and Natural Resources show up, potentially do two reports, and depending on the remediation, you might need to do two remediation reports too. So it was really overwhelming, I think, for those folks that had that accident. This way, we've been able to in-house it into one program, and it's usually just one inspector, one report, and still gets the same results for the environment and the regulatory community. So I think that's been a nice dollars and cents side. On the dollars and cents side, I should say that We saved almost $500,000 in 5 FTEs. Those were 5 open FTEs, but we're able to get rid of them through some synergies we found in the merger.
So, a couple of examples you've shared where coming together has been a good thing. Do you believe the merging of these departments has accomplished what it was intended to do? And perhaps what's maybe become harder?
Yeah, I think so. Definitely, I think we've worked hard at it. You look at corporate culture. It was interesting when I met with every team member of both departments, at least in a group fashion, when we went through this merger process, talking about kind of where all the pieces went. The vast majority of the Department of Ag side, why do you work? Their thoughts are, when I'd ask the question, why do you work for the Department of Agriculture? It was because they like working with the ag community, they like working with farmers. On the Environment and Natural Resources side, it was working with the people. So how do you merge those two sides? We're still working on that. Of course, we've been through a pandemic. That didn't really help the team building side of things. But in general, I mean, whenever you announce these new things, these changes, you get kind of the wild sides of both ends. The environmentalists thought, oh geez, ag's gonna take over and we're not gonna do our job and the environment's gonna go to hell. Well, I don't think that's happened. In the ag side, you have, oh, the environmentalists are gonna take over, we're not gonna be able to do anything, it's gonna be awful, the world's gonna end. I don't think that's happened. I don't think, at least I'm not hearing that. Certainly, I think, we enforce the laws. We certainly support agriculture. We support the environment. We want to do better for both. We want to grow both sides of the department. But also, I think we've implemented it well, and I think the team is doing a good job providing that customer service, which is critical. I think we've really hammered on that with our staff, and they've taken it well. And I think things are going good.
Well, I really appreciate that level of insight because from what I recall, it was a somewhat controversial decision. There were presumptions and assumptions of what could happen. You mentioned the unintentional neglect of environmental priorities. Have any of those anticipated issues come to fruition? How did you maneuver when you did run into those issues in the beginning?
Well, I guess I work in the regulated community. There's always accidents. People make mistakes. Whether it be a cheese plant or a production facility or just a co-op that had an accident. I think we try to be fair. We try to implement what the law says and make people do what they've committed to doing in a reasonable timeline. Certainly, one avenue I think is that I've focused on is looking at kind of longer term. What happens today, if we can fix this over 6 months and it's going to last for the next 30, that's okay. Versus, the immediacy of knee-jerk reactions that sometimes happens in government, especially on the regulatory side, I think has been helpful and helped us work through a few of these issues.
Very good.
I would also say that the vast majority of ag producers in South Dakota probably don't want to see more government. They don't want to see the agency out there banging on their door, asking them to do new things. I'll say the vast majority of them are multi-generational farmers that have been on that land for 100+ years and are in it for the long term and doing the right thing anyway and definitely understand what is the right thing. So, sustainability is what they're in for. You're not looking at 5th or 6th generation families if you're not doing it sustainably, because that resource is going to go away if you don't do it that way.
Very good. You're also doing some big things in your department. If I have this number wrong, correct it. Your department received $600 million in federal funds for water waste infrastructure. Is that the right number?
Mm-hmm.
First of all, what is water waste infrastructure? How does it fit into your department?
Great question. Yeah, so we had Senate Bill 62 this year. The state of South Dakota is in a great financial situation. I'm sure you heard this, where we have the federal government's printed a bunch of money and given it out to states to use for different resources. South Dakota is in such a strong position that Governor Noem was looking at ways to utilize that funding invest that federal funding into long-term benefits for the citizens. We talked about water and wastewater infrastructure, so anything from a water treatment facility that has a groundbreaking, or expansion of the water treatment facility that has a groundbreaking in Sioux Falls next week, to clean drinking water, Lewis and Clark water system, to rural water systems that provide water to our rural residents. That's kind of what the water and wastewater infrastructure is. Governor Noem, through Senate Bill 62, put in proposed $600 million of that federal funding, so the majority of that federal funding, to invest in that infrastructure. What that does, it gives an opportunity for maybe some of our water, wastewater systems to catch up on their investments that they need to do, or to expand as growth has happened. Like you look at Lewis and Clark in water system that serves Sioux Falls and 14 other communities in this area. They through the drought and growth of the communities in this area, need to expand their system. So through that funding, we're able to give grants and loan packages to these different entities to help keep those costs down for ratepayers, but then also allow us to make that substantial investment. So it's been a wild 6 months or 7 months since we started talking about this. The legislature voted unanimously, both sides of the Senate and the House, on the floors for this funding, which surprised me, but certainly shows the commitment into infrastructure investment by our legislature. This last couple weeks, we did our first round of grant funding. We're planning on using this $600 million of ARPA grant funding over the next year, essentially. So 5 funding cycles quarterly. The first cycle, we hit it hard. We had a $3.5 billion of projects in the hopper. Of course, not all those projects are going to happen. Not all of them should happen, and we couldn't build them in the 6 years that we have to build out ARPA funding anyway. But there are a lot of good projects on that. So through this last funding round, we gave out, we awarded funding. The department's unique, or it's nice that we have kind of a one-stop shop for funding. We'll give you grant funding, but then also fill it in with low-interest loan funding that we have bonding authority for. Mm-hmm. So this last round, we had, I think, 115 projects for $1.1 billion. We provided, of that, 415 million of it was grants, 405 of which was ARPA grants. So passed the bill in early May, or early March, and pushed out $415 million, 5 weeks later. So it was pretty aggressive, but definitely a multi-generational investment by Governor Noem and our legislature in moving forward with our infrastructure.
So very, very quickly, you laid out quite a game plan for those dollars, and they're going to work right away.
Right away. Certainly, water, wastewater infrastructure is not a fast thing. Certainly, we need to spend that money by the end of 2026, so projects have that timeline to move forward. We also, with that funding, are going to provide grants to projects that were currently in the hopper, but had already been received funding, but had not started construction before March 3rd per ARPA. So the City of Sioux Falls wastewater treatment facility was in the works. It's our biggest project the department's ever standalone done. I think it's a $150 to $200 million project. It depends on how you piece it out. They'd already received a $100+ million loan from the department, but next month we're going to come in and provide them with a $40 million grant so they don't have to borrow as much for us ratepayers.
Well, another big activity that took place in the department was a 2021 economic contribution study. What is that? What did you learn? And what are you going to do with what you learned?
Well, certainly our state is urbanizing, but when you look at kind of what we did, this is something that the department's done every kind of 5 or so years. I think it was 6 years since before the last one. It was time for a re-up of it. Certainly the ag economy prices in the timeline that went into that were down a little bit, impactful-wise, but just, new department, time to roll out a reboot of those numbers. What that told us is still almost 20% of the state's workforce is tied to agriculture. 130,000 people, a lot of ag input in our state, a lot of ag influence in our state. $32 billion of economic impact because of agriculture, or output because of agriculture. You know, that's 31% of our state's output, so certainly a huge player when you look at the scheme of things. What I always found interesting, and I can't remember the exact numbers, but they had it pieced out county by county, especially a few of the bigger counties. The impact of Minnehaha County from agriculture is astounding. I mean, you have kind of the hog processing facility, Poet, just a lot of different processing side of things. And it's, I think, like $8 billion of output because of something like that. I probably shouldn't be quoting it. Something like that for output just because of in Minnehaha County because of agriculture. So it is really, I mean, Sioux Falls is certainly an economic engine for our state, and in agriculture it's the exact same thing. You know, we always think of how we're urbanizing as a state, but still agriculture is a huge player. I know when you look at growth opportunities, if you grow agriculture by 3% and it's a third of your economy, that adds a whole 1% to your economy. That's a great opportunity where you don't have to go for this. I mean, we should be targeting a lot of different industries, but certainly agriculture, you don't have to make as big a gain where it really impacts everyone because it's such a big part of our economy.
Is there something in particular that you are going to be doing with what you learned?
I think yes and no. I mean, certainly tell the story. A lot of what we do is, or a lot of what I try to do is let people realize where their food comes from, why it's safe, why it's raised right. Certainly what you see in social media, especially in some of the news, is not the full story. We have a very safe, well thought out food industry in our country. We are the breadbasket for a lot of our nation, or for our nation and a lot of other nations as well. We have very productive agriculture. Let's continue to grow that, continue to support that as we grow in our state, even with more urbanization.
Let's switch gears to the state fair.
Okay.
You mentioned that when you talked about the scope of your work. While us city slickers may pay a little more attention to the concert announcements and the rodeo, there's obviously a lot more to the state fair than entertainment. You mentioned that. What is the relevancy of the state fair, and how will the state fair maintain its relevancy as our community's demographic does change?
Good question. We've done some master planning and some strategic planning. Someone helped lead that strategic plan, so she could probably tell me about as good as anyone. But certainly we're looking at what the state fair offers. Like I said, it's a great opportunity for agriculture. It's a big part of our fair. It's a great opportunity for family bonding. And actually the state's biggest campground is at the state fair. Not many people realize that, but a lot of parts of South Dakota, that's their family vacation. You know, Labor Day weekend, 5-6 days, maybe 7 days of state fair. They'll camp there, spend the whole week there, and that's their family summer vacation. It's cool stuff. The way the state fair stays relevant is responding to the people. How do we serve them? That's what we're here for, to make sure that they are engaged, that they enjoy it, that they come and attend, because that's what funds the fair. Largely it's fee driven. We spend a lot of time on the education side of things and supporting 4-H, FFA, with all the different things they do at the fair. It's kind of, it's the state fair. We only have one of those, and it's kind of it's the end of the year kind of last hurrah for a lot of those show people for their animals, or whether it be on the artistic side or writing side. There's a lot of different opportunities there. We certainly push the reading side too. Okay. I think there's 4th grade readers. We have a reading program that we work with a lot of the schools with. If you hit a certain threshold of reading, you get free fair tickets. So it's a good kind of win-win, I think, for sure. What am I missing, Cindy?
Well, not long ago, there was a little shakeup with a little smoke and fire. Everyone remember that? What's evolved at the fairgrounds since that happened? What's going to be different?
So Halloween night we had a fire break out at the state fair. We had what we think is a refrigerator wire go bad, and it burned our open class beef complex, which was the biggest building at the state fair, hosted a lot of events in the winter as well. It burned down. We found out that replacing it would be pretty expensive, but we thought, geez, if we burn this down, we have a little insurance money, but we're going to need to ask the legislature for more money just to build the same thing. How do we look at maybe this is an opportunity to do something bigger? We came up with some ideas, and we are in the process. We're under construction on the Dakota Events Complex. What that facility will be is during the state fair, it'll host the open class and the 4-H beef shows. So there'll be 1,700 pens in there and 2 show arenas, and it'll be nice for that. But the rest of the time of year, it gives us an opportunity to utilize a new, I guess, primarily livestock venue that's heated in the winter. It creates, is enclosed. We have a lot of garage doors to open things up in the summer, and we'll have some big fans, but in the winter, it gives us an opportunity to shoulder more of those type of events, whether it be rodeo or barrel racing and all sorts of cattle shows, livestock shows, sheep shows, all kinds of different opportunities. We thought, well, as long as we're building, let's build a new, better building here that can also fit a lot of different boxes. The facility will also have a seating for 5,000 in bleachers there too. So we're kind of looking at tapping some different audiences and being a resource outside of just that fair week, having another venue where we can do a lot of these fun things for our citizens, and also capitalize on revenue for the fair more year-round, keep our staff busy.
Total subject change. Where and how does cannabis fall under the Department of Ag and Natural Resources?
So the Department of Agriculture and Natural Resources has an industrial hemp program. That's the CBD oil and the feed and fiber side of things. It's not the stuff that gets you high, or shouldn't be the stuff that gets you high. If it's that level, we don't regulate you, we call the cops. We had our first season last year, or our first year of having a program last year. We didn't have anyone test higher than the legal thresholds, which was great. Certainly a good thing. It is a growing industry, the hemp, the feed and fiber side. The CBD oil side was very profitable 10 years ago, and it's really tanked. And it's more like gardening. It's CBD oil side of things. It's a lot more labor intensive, and I guess a lot of the growers that did it last year are not doing it this year. They're looking at more of the feed and fiber side of things. So we've really kind of focused on the feed and fiber as probably the bigger opportunity for South Dakota, where we have a lot more open spaces, and there's plenty of work for people that want to do other things, I think. So it's been interesting. We've been trying to stay out of the marijuana side of things, whether it be recreational or medical, and have kind of stayed out of that. Medical is the Department of Health. Recreational, if that ever happens, will be largely Department of Revenue.
Well, thank you for indulging my curiosity and helping clarify those pieces.
It's a fun end. I mean, there's some opportunity to grow there. Certainly, like any new plant, people think that you can use it for everything, and there are a ton of uses for the feed and fiber side. You can make boards out of it. You can use it for concrete, lighting. There's all kinds of, obviously clothing. There's all kinds of neat things for hemp. Of course, at the end of the day, you can do a lot of things with corn. You can do a lot of things with wheat. It's what pays, what's the cheapest, what enters the market the right way. So they're working with that now. Last year we had, I think, 1,600 acres of industrial hemp, and this year we'll have over 2,000. I wouldn't be surprised if we had 4,000 acres. So it's a growing industry.
Oh my goodness.
Of course, we have 35,000 acres of farm ground in South, or 35 million acres of farm ground in South Dakota. So it's not.
So some perspective.
It's got some room to grow.
We have 3.5 minutes, and I have 2 more questions I want to ask you.
Okay.
A lot of the ag industry is out of our control. When you think about recent international decisions, such as the war in Ukraine, how does that impact agriculture back home?
Great question. It just creates volatility. And with this volatility, it creates opportunities, and it creates a lot of opportunities for losses too, threats. So you look at just the fertilizer side of things. Fertilizer prices in the last year have more than doubled everywhere. And that's a key input when you come to planting corn and wheat. Certainly it's very important. The more investment the producer puts out there, the more risk. So it's certainly creating volatility, more risk. In the alternatives, certainly we look at $17 beans, which is soybeans, which has never happened before. very high wheat prices and high corn prices too, it creates opportunities too. Of course, we're on, I know you're going to get to this, I hope, we're in the middle of a drought in much of South Dakota. 87% of our state is in some form of drought as of last Thursday. Hopefully these last rounds of rains have helped some, but.
Well, and throw that in right now. Go ahead.
Okay. So that's more risk as well. We're facing that. You know, the grain side of things, there's pretty good insurance company or insurance mechanisms out there for our producers where I'm not as worried about them. The livestock side, there isn't really great insurance mechanisms out there for our producers, and the grass is short. It was dry last year. Going into a second year of a drought cycle, the people don't have leftover hay. They don't have anything to feed them, you know, in the storage vault. So what's that going to happen next year or this year is really a concern for me, and certainly something that we're looking to throw every resource we have, which is in this case is largely federal, to help those producers.
Well, my last question. Tell us why this department is important to South Dakota, but more so, tell this room what is your vision for the department's future?
Ooh. Well, I mean, I guess I think the department's, obviously, like I said before, I think the Secretary's job is to be a leader in the ag industry and the environmental industries. I think that's a big part of our role, but I'd prefer us to be a leader, but not probably really out front. I think a lot of what we do that's great is behind the scenes, on that customer service project, being technical experts, moving things forward for the state instead of being the person out front, you know, claiming that we're taking credit for things. And reality is private investment, our producers are the ones that really get the job done. We're just there to support them and help them move it along.
Well, this was a treat. This is one of my favorite hours of every week, and Secretary Roberts, thank you for sharing it with us. Please help me thank our Secretary of Ag and Natural Resources.
Well, thank you, Cindy and Hunter. You covered a lot of ground in half an hour. And thank you for shining a light on agriculture and the importance that has on our state and where we go. Looking ahead, I was notified that we are in the works on a Rotary Friendship Exchange to Norway, so we will be in touch with you, pair, and more to come on that. Also, more to come on a topic that is very near and dear to many of your hearts with Rotary, and that's the Hope Haven Uganda Wheelchair Project. Next week, we are going to have a program highlighting Hope Haven and the important work that is happening there. We're going to have Steve Sikorsky, Mark Simmonsma, and Andrew Devaney join here to talk about some of their current work and how Rotarians can get involved. So look forward to having you back next Monday. In the meantime, have a great week. Thanks.